My name is Kari Bryan. I was 17 years old. I was a senior in high school when the Columbine shootings happened. Since then, I've gotten married and now I live in Utah with my 4 kids. High school was really, it's hard for everybody, but I was having a lot of emotional struggles in high school, and so I was trying my best to just get out of there. So, end of the first semester, senior year, I only needed half a credit to graduate because of extra stuff I'd done. So I opted to do a home study course instead of go on campus every day. I worked full time and I sometimes worked on my home study class and tried to get that done. So I had done an internship that first semester, and they were going to do like a lunch reception for all of the interns on April 20th. And so I'd gotten an invitation and it was supposed to be at lunchtime. I don't remember what time, but I was going to go to it, and then I was going to check my brother out. Not really check him out because I couldn't do that, but I was going to take him and we were going to, go do something fun together. And my boss called me at 10 o'clock that night, Monday night. I worked at a coffee shop, and she wanted to know if I could open the shop the next day. And I thought, well, I'm supposed to go over to the school to go do this thing, but I can come in for a while. And then she said she'd try to get there early so I could leave. And it was just over like a mile from the school. And we started hearing all these sirens go by, and we started joking that, oh, Littleton, it's turning into the ghetto now. And but they just kept coming. So by then my boss had gotten there, and she said, oh, you can leave if you want. I thought, well, I don't know. It's probably already started. I'll just stay here. And then she came out of the back room and she said, there's a shooting at the school. Like, something's going on at the school. And we thought, oh, it's probably just like 2 people just, like a little fight or something, because, who could imagine what was really happening? And didn't really think a whole lot of it, but we turned on the news and started watching it. And I remember it just felt like time froze. And, like people were still trying to figure out what was happening. And so the news was really kind of mixed up and not knowing what was going on. And here I'm just in this coffee shop thinking, oh my gosh, I was supposed to take my brother. Like, what's going on? So my boss left to go see if she could find her daughter. Her daughter was a sophomore at the time, I think, or a freshman. She said, you can close the shop, like you can leave. And I don't know what it was. I think it was just the way I was like coping with not knowing what was going on, but I walked through every single step of closing down the shop that day. Turned everything off. I broke everything down, put everything away, and later my boss was like, you could have just left, like unplugged and left. You didn't have to do that, but it was like I needed that routine to figure out what was happening. And so we did that, and while I was doing that, my mom called and said she'd heard from Kelly and that he had gone to lunch with some friends and they couldn't get back to the school and they didn't know what was happening. And we went and picked him up, and then we went home, and my youngest brother, Kenny, was homesick that day from the junior high. So he was there, so we were all there together. And from there, like, it gets a little confusing for me that day. Like, I don't really remember what happened and what didn't. I remembered it as in, like, we were just there by ourselves, watching the news, trying to figure out what was going on, and I didn't know where my parents were. And my mom had left, I guess, to go help a friend look for her kids, because we were at home, we were safe, so we were okay. I remember just sitting there watching it on the news, and so now when things happen, like, then the news coverage is a really strong trigger for me, because that was how I experienced it. And with some other events, it doesn't get to me as much, but anytime there's images from, Columbine that they show that way, it's like I feel right in that moment. And my boyfriend was in the school for hours and hours, locked in the choir room, and I remember watching the news as they were walking people out of the school and looking at every face, trying to see if it was somebody that I knew. And that night they had a gathering at a church nearby, at the Light of the World or something, and I remember everybody went there, and this was just a real feeling. And at the end of it, I was leaving, And these girls ran up to each other in the hall and just started sobbing. I thought you died. I thought you died. And that memory has always stuck with me. Like, it was just so powerful. Yeah, it was really hard at first because I didn't know how to talk to people and relate to people because it wasn't in the school. I didn't have to go back to the school. And so I wasn't really sure where I fit with it. But I knew that everything I knew had suddenly changed. Especially being a senior where I had gone to school for years with Eric and Dylan. I played blackjack with them at the after prom party just a few days before. I wouldn't say that we were friends, but like I knew who they were. I had classes with them. I have a really vivid memory of being in chemistry class junior year with Dylan, and he was joking about how he hacked into the computers in 7th grade and got expelled, and like we're like laughing and joking, and he seemed like a nice guy and weird but nice. And so that was a really difficult thing for me because I felt like not only had like the world completely changed, but now I didn't know who I could trust because I felt like I sat next to Eric in government class every day first semester senior year. And so it just really messed up, and I just felt like I couldn't really trust anybody. And I was already planning on leaving 2 weeks later to start summer semester college. BYU was really gracious, and they offered to just average my scores together on my class I'd been taking and give me a final grade instead of making me complete it after everything that happened, which I might not have ever completed it if they hadn't done that, so that was really great. But yeah, I already had this plan to go to college, and I think I knew leaving for college so soon was just a way out, and that I wasn't ready for it. I wish somebody had said, hey, your whole life was just turned upside down. Maybe you're not ready to move out of state and go to college in 2 weeks. But, nobody knew what to do. We were all just trying to make things normal. And I wish I could go back and tell myself that it's okay that it's not normal. And that you need time to figure it out. My first day of classes at Utah State University, I got on the shuttle bus to go over to the campus, and it's only been a few weeks, so it's on the radio and they're talking about it and looking around at everybody, and they're laughing and talking, and like life is just going, and I still felt frozen. And it was like it was just like surreal. And I got into my English class and they wanted to talk about current events. So they started talking about it and why they thought it happened. And it was like I was looking at all these people thinking, like, you don't know. You weren't there. You don't know what happened. How can you say it was because of this or this? Like, and they had no idea that somebody from that community was sitting in class. But so I walked out of that class and I never went back. I didn't go back to any of my classes that semester. I just checked out. I tried to go to a therapist on campus, and they looked at me like I had two heads when I said I'm from Columbine, and they didn't really know how to help me. So instead, I started using drugs. And I failed all my classes that semester, and my parents made me come home. And they tried taking me to a therapist, but it was still kind of like, it wasn't so much, we're going to take you to therapy because we think maybe Columbine messed you up and you need help. It was like, what's wrong with you? Why are you messing up? Like that wasn't even part of the equation, really. And it might have been, but, to my teenage brain, it wasn't really like that so much anymore. So that didn't really work very well. And ended up getting in a really, really unhealthy relationship and moved out of the house right away to move in with him. And just spent the next few years kind of just bouncing around, just doing really unhealthy things, and not really sure where I was going, what was happening. I had cut most of my ties with my Columbine friends because it was easier not to have to face it. My siblings and I still don't talk about it. Like, we each have our own story, but we've never talked about it together. And yeah, it was just really, really confusing. And it kind of all came to a head at one point when I was 19 and I actually tried to commit suicide and was hospitalized for a while. And then I started going to therapy a little bit more, but I still didn't talk about it. Like I didn't feel like it was my story. It was always there, like, oh yeah, I've been through this, but I'm okay. I wasn't there, I'm okay. So I always just kind of brushed it off. Fast forward several years, I got my act together and cleaned my life up and got married and started having kids and thought I was pretty much okay with it. I still felt really nervous when I go places, and that was confusing to me because I thought I hadn't been in a position where I needed to escape, but I still look for exits and I still get uncomfortable in large crowds, and that was really confusing to me. So once my kids got big enough and started going to school, I realized that this was a pretty big thing in my head that I needed to figure out. My son's first day of kindergarten, I went in and I was so worried about where he was sitting. I didn't want him by the back door. I didn't want him by the front door. I didn't there was just no safe place for him to sit that I was comfortable with. And his poor little teacher, who was probably 2 years old when Columbine happened, was just like, I don't know what to do with you. And I went and I sat in the car in the parking lot and I cried the whole time he was in school that day. And it was really hard for me to learn to leave him there and go home because I thought, something happens again, I can't be at home watching it, not knowing where my kids are. I need to be there with them. But I know I can't homeschool them because they'll never learn anything their whole lives. So I thought I was doing a little bit better with it. And then Sandy Hook happened. And I was at a conference, a marriage thing with my husband. And, somebody texted me, don't look at the news, which is code for look at the news, So I did, and we were on a lunch break, and I just, fell apart in this crazy, ugly cry in the middle of Chick-fil-A. I was like, we have to go home, we we can't be here. My kids were with my mom that day, they weren't even at school, so he's like, let's just stay, it's okay, so we, he just couldn't. I was just a mess, and the whole rest of the weekend was shot for me. And when we finally got back to my mom's to get the kids the next day, I just cried, and I don't know, I pulled them out of school, and I didn't take them back till after Christmas. And nobody understood why I wouldn't take them back to school, but it was just just too much. So by this time I had a therapist and stuff that I had a pretty good relationship with, and was on some different medications, and I had a doctor to help me manage those, and was kind of talking to him about it, and he was like, have you ever done any trauma counseling? I was like, well, no, because, he's like, no, have you ever done any counseling for Columbine? I was like, well, I wasn't in the school, so I'm okay. He's like, Kari, no, you didn't have to witness things the same way your friends did in order to have PTSD. You're very much affected by this. And I thought, oh, I don't know. I just didn't, at the time, feel like that was, a good fit for me, because it was still really in a lot of denial about it. But I agreed to do it anyway. But one thing I was afraid of was I didn't want to talk about it, because I didn't know how to put words with those feelings. And anytime I'd tried to before with a therapist, it got lost in translation because the emotions were so strong and I didn't know where they were coming from. And so I finally agreed to it and started seeing this lady, and we did EMDR therapy, which ended up being a really, really powerful, really effective therapy for me because I didn't have to talk about it. But we probably met every few weeks for a year working on it. And during that time is when the Rebels Project started and they had their support group. And so I flew out to Denver to go to their group. And that's when I was able to go to a support meeting in the school, which creeped me out, but with, other students, especially a lot of other seniors, and to hear friends say who had been there, who had been in the library, or who had, had to escape, for them to say to me, your experience is just as valid as mine, and your pain and trauma is just as real, really was very, very powerful for me, because I had lived for however many years, like 14 years or something, with this survivor's guilt that I felt like I had to bury because I felt like it wasn't mine. And I've learned that the connections I'm making now, where I'm reconnecting with people from high school, how powerful those are. And that shared understanding that even though our experience wasn't the same, the overall experience of having your life change so profoundly is the same. And so I think I would really encourage people just to not isolate themselves, and search for some sort of community where there is that common understanding, because that goes a long way towards healing. It's still a battle. I had a panic attack at school like 2 weeks ago because too much talk about school shootings. And here I am almost 20 years after high school trying to go back to college, because it was just too much at the beginning. But yeah, it's just a journey that is just transforms as life goes on. And each stage of life that my kids get into makes me feel differently about it. Like, my son's almost 14, and I think, oh my gosh, like, he'll be a 9th grader next year, and he'll be in junior high still, but that was high school for us. Like, he could be in high school. If this happens, he would be that age group. And that blows me away. For one, I think it can't possibly have been that many years that, I can have a kid in your high school age, but it just, I look at how young he is and how, the way he views the world and things like that, and I think, wow, we were just babies. We were just babies, and we had no idea how to cope with it, what to do. Nobody knew that everybody in all these different places with it, nobody knew how they were affected. My 8th grade brother, my brother who was in 8th grade at the time, who was my son's age now, I think it greatly affected his life and influenced the path that he went down. And I often wonder if he had received help, if someone had acknowledged that even though he wasn't a student of the school, but he had to go to the school the next year, if someone had acknowledged that maybe that came with a lot of its own issues, maybe that would have helped him, I don't know. I mean, I think people did the best they knew at the time, but I just wish they had known. But as I've gone through other difficult things since then, it really has changed the way I treat myself with it, and allowed me to recognize just how big a role trauma is. I think sometimes when we go through something difficult, or we imagine going through something difficult, you think that you'll deal with it for a little while, and then you move on, and life continues, and you go on, pick up where you left off after a while. And it doesn't do that. It stops, it rewires things, and it sends you on a different path. And if you're always fighting to get back onto the other path, you can never move forward. I think about that a lot now as things happen, because I think, they say this many victims or this many injured, and I think you have no idea the scope of how many people are injured, because those emotional things just stay with you. I wish I knew a way to change it, and I wish I knew how to fix people after the fact. Because if we can't stop it, we've got to figure out how to take care of people afterwards.